Hello and welcome to another edition of CryptoKoryo podcast. And we are starting this second episode of the year with again another LRT project because, as you know, LRT is the hottest trend this year. And so we are strongly focusing on that. Last week, we had the opportunity to talk with Cofounder, and we went actually through the basics of what is restaking, what is LRT, and an overview. Today, I have the opportunity to have Mike, co-founder of EtherFi. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how's it going? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. So today we will go more in depth about the LRT narrative. We already know the basics, and so we want to go deeper. But before doing that, please, Mike, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your background and how you came to DeFi?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do it. Yeah, I guess I got into crypto early, which is basically just saying I bought some Bitcoin back in 2011, and have been excited about the space and what it could mean for people for a long time. But I didn't really focus on it full time until much later. So specifically, I played with some mining. I did some trading. Didn't do anything serious until 2021 when I jumped in, full force. Prior to that, I was running another company in the education software space. But yeah, the way I got started in this universe is actually as a fund, because I sold the other company and decided to start a fund that focused on ETH staking. And as part of this fund, what we were obviously doing is evaluating different staking opportunities that were available. We looked at, of course, Rocket Pool, Lido, and centralized exchanges. What became clear to us was that there was an opportunity to build like a V2 of a staking protocol. Specifically, we were super excited about restaking. We thought that was going to be a huge opportunity. Even before the hype, I felt that this was going to be a major ecosystem. So we're excited about that, and we wanted a liquid staking protocol with a much stronger non-custodial proposition. In other words, that where the stakers actually had control of their keys and could get their ETH back if they wanted it. So both of those things, it felt to me like this is a product that I want to exist, and so we basically pivoted the fund to be just a feeder vehicle into the product and focused 100% of our energies on EtherFi.
Amazing. That's interesting to hear because it's not every day that you hear a fund, pivoting to launching a protocol, a DeFi protocol. And so this is very interesting. It's the first case that I know actually. Great. We will talk more about actually EtherFi's differentiator, as you mentioned, about having giving custody to your clients. This is a key factor in EtherFi. But before diving into EtherFi, let's talk about restaking. So we know the basics. We know that the basic idea of restaking is to use Ethereum security to actually help other networks or bridges or oracles give them the same security and help them run. And then in return, get the yield from those networks. Now, I want to go deeper in how does it work. So we know that there are two ways we can deposit. There is native ETH, which is what you guys are proposing, so people can actually go on EtherFi and deposit ETH. And then there are the LST also deposit, which other protocols like Kelp and Inception are doing that. Now, I want to understand in both cases what happens behind the scenes. Let's say that I deposit 10 ETH into EtherFi. What does happen to my 10 ETH? Where does it go? Where does it get locked?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a very important distinction between native and non-native restaking that I think will become more important over time. Like right now, we're sort of sitting in the world where like there is no restaking, right? In other words, there are no LRTs, AVSs that are active. This is all really just points farming at this point. So so the distinction doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It's just you're putting one ETH one way or another. But I think it is an important distinction because different kinds of ETH are very likely, in fact, I would say almost certainly, going to earn different yields in restaking. And I can talk more about why I think that is. And initially, just to jump even further ahead, is I think there will be almost infinite supply of LSTs looking to restake and no demand. So I think that will create a really interesting dynamic that will create this separation. So that's the preview of why this distinction matters. But let's talk about specifically what it is. So in restaking, and if you read the restaking paper, the way restaking is effectively described is as a programmable slashing layer. So currently slashing rules on Ethereum are very specific. If you double sign a block, if you miss attestations, etc. There's certain rules where if you stake your 32 ETH, if your validator does bad stuff, you get slashed. So the way EigenLayer creates a programmable slashing layer is such that when you spin up a validator, meaning you deposit 32 ETH and spin up a validator, your withdrawal credentials, which is where the ETH goes when you shut down the validator, get pointed to an EigenPod contract. So it gets pointed to a specific contract that allows other services to hook into it, other blockchains, as you say, bridges, oracles, DA layers, etc., other services to hook into it and say, okay, we're validating the service using this ETH now as security, and if this this validator does bad stuff, again, double side, whatever the slashing rules are, then it gets slashed. So now you can layer multiple slashing rules, multiple effectively stakes that you can take in other services in exchange for fees from those services, in exchange for additional revenue. So that's the basic. That is what restaking is meant to be. So EigenLayer, I think, intelligently and probably correctly said, well, that's a pretty high bar. In other words, you're asking people to spin up new validators and set their withdrawal credentials to our contracts. That's a high bar for people to deposit their ETH. And so they created another way of restaking, which is, I don't know how to describe it, maybe call it restaking light, where you just have a giant pool of tokens. And just it's a list of whitelisted tokens that people can deposit into this pool. It's somewhat arbitrarily, I guess it's deliberately chosen to be only LSTs, but really, in theory, any token can go into this pool. And right now it supports, RETH, STETH, et cetera, all the big LSTs. And then that pool as a whole provides slashing conditions and an ability to hook in these other services that can slash that pool based on the choices that the users in the pool make. So you have these two different ways. One, where you're actually spinning up validators, pointing to withdrawal credentials and create a programmable slashing layer. And the other, you've got a giant pool that can get slashed by those same mechanisms. Now, the challenge with that pool is the pooled approach. Maybe I'll even pause there. Does that make sense as a distinction of what those two differences are? Or is it worth talking about why? Yeah, okay. So the challenge with the pooled approach is it has several disadvantages over the direct kind of native restaking approach. And these are, it's possible to overcome them, but they are real challenges. So the first, for example, is that it offers a much weaker security guarantee. Maybe that's too strong a way to put it. It's a weaker security guarantee. I don't know how much weaker, because if to explain that, like if, for example, one of the LSTs gets hacked, like let's say Lido or whatever gets hacked, your security, goes away as an AVS. Your security. Yeah, exactly. From every LST that you accept, if you're running a service and you're saying, okay, I'm going to accept these 10 LSTs, you're now exposed to all 10 of them because you're accepting them as collateral. So that it's you can actually think of that as a compounding risk. So it's a weaker security guarantee. With native restaking, it's you don't really have that risk because the ETH doesn't actually live in the contract. The ETH is staked. The ETH is in the beacon chain deposit contract. So if we get hacked or EigenLayer gets hacked, nothing happens. You can't actually access the ETH. They would need to trigger an exit of the validator, which will take days, and then obviously that would be detected. The contract would be paused, fixed, and so on. So you don't really have anywhere close to the same type of risk. It's much more direct and straightforward. And it also has, I have concerns about the centralizing forces of non-native restaking, because if you're an AVS, you have a choice of which LSTs you whitelist as having the ability to provide slashable security to you. I think everyone is just going to choose Lido. Everyone is just, because no one's going to do diligence and a deep dive into 20 different LSTs, because it's too much work. People are busy. I don't see them saying, yeah, sure, all 25 LST variants, yeah, we'll accept that. I think realistically that people are just going to choose like SDETH, RETH, and everybody else, is kind of left out. And so that's why I say there's going to be a situation where there's like, 100,000 ETH of some, really great LST looking for yield, but nobody chooses it because nobody wants to like bother with the audit, and there's infinity SDETH sitting there. So that's one centralizing force. And then I think the same kind of thing will occur on the user side, because as a user, if you're putting in SDETH into EigenLayer, you get to choose who's your operator, which node operator do you want to give your ETH to. And I think, again, that's a second centralizing force that will lead people to choose P2P, Blockdaemon, like, the big guys that run, Lido's nodes, for example. Certainly no one's going to say, oh yeah, Bob, the solo staker, I'm going to give it to them. So all of these things I think make non-native restaking a much trickier value proposition. There's other reasons why AVSs would probably prefer natively restaked ETH. So I think you're going to have natively restaked ETH. I don't know if it's going to be in high demand, but there's going to be demand for it. And then non-natively restaked ETH, there's just not going to be a ton of interest in it for a while, because it's going to take time for AVSs to come online, right? EigenDA is launching, others are launching, but it may be years, it may be a year or two before you really get enough AVSs online. So I think what EigenLayer is focusing on, again, correctly, is just getting as many AVSs online as possible, because they have infinite supply of ETH. It's just a fire hose of ETH being thrown at them. What they need is people that are going to use that ETH. It's this kind of really interesting three-sided marketplace, which is quite complex. I mean, a two-sided marketplace is hard enough to manage. This is a three-sided marketplace. So it gets interesting.
You mentioned about a lot of different topics that we're going to cover in more detail later, about Lido risk, centralization, etc. I want to get back to actually every decision has a trade-off, right? So we are saying native ETH is less risky, one layer less of risk, also preferred by AVSs because again, because there is less risk. However, what's the counter side? So what is it that can we say native ETH is giving less yield to the end user, who wants to restake, because that's the compromise, or what is it that you're giving away for that extra security?
It's no, I think it'll be higher yield because there'll be more demand for it. So I actually think the yield will be higher. The only downside to it is it's more complex, right? Like literally in 2 hours, I could go and spin up an ERC20 wrapper of SDETH, into EigenLayer. Like that's why there's like 20 projects a day launching doing that, because it's the easiest thing in the world, right? Just like you could probably pull a contract off of Open Zeppelin, add another 20 lines, and you're done. Yeah, it's very simple. Our contracts have, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 lines of code, which for smart contracts is a lot. There's just a lot more complexity. You have to manage that complexity. You have to deposits, redemptions, all that stuff is quite complex. That's really the only trade-off. I think in every other way, it's better. I honestly, yeah.
for a user perspective, for me who wants to restake and get that extra yield, you're saying that
Yeah.
I'm really much better going to a protocol like you guys who accept native ETH. I'm not getting less yield. I'm getting extra security, less risk. So it's all benefits.
Mhm.
Okay.
That is correct. I would say that we've gotten really big. I'm genuinely getting concerned at how big we're getting. As of this moment, I think we're at close to 700 million in ETH,
I just checked
which is just
your TVL on DeFi Lemma. It says 620 million, which again we're going to talk about that, but it's amazing to
it's
see.
high now. Yeah, it's just it's just a rocket ship, like straight up, basically. So again, it's genuinely like problematic how big it is. Like we have, frankly, a much too large a share of restaked ETH. We're I think something like 27% of all restaked ETH, which is too big. So so choose. It may sound weird me saying this, but choose another. We don't want to be. We don't want to be the Lido of restaking. So I would say take a look at other native restaking products. For the two, I guess I don't know these in detail, but they seem like really good teams. So Renzo is one, and then Swell just recently released a natively restaked product. I think those are the only two that are actually, honestly, natively restaked. So check those out. At least diversify. Don't just ape into EtherFi.
Yeah, I think I have a list actually on my Dune dashboard with different LRT protocols. From what I'm seeing, there apart from EtherFi, there's Renzo, which accepts native ETH, but as well Genesis. Genesis also does that, and
Yeah,
so
I haven't
that's
heard of those guys.
yeah, very good. So in terms of security, I want to ask you: there are if you read generally about restaking, you would see in a lot of places that restaking is good for the security of Ethereum. It helps. However, if you read actually more nuanced interpretations from the core Ethereum community specifically, I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw, but Doug Colkit, he released a meme video recently where I don't know if you
Oh
saw
no.
that, but there was actually a quote where he was criticizing LST protocols and saying that it's actually mostly due to this Lido, centralization part and all of these things. In essence, can you say, does restaking improve Ethereum security, or does it, or no?
I don't. So that's a little bit like saying, is a knife really good or bad? It's like, well, it could be used to cook or it could be used to stab someone. Like it depends how you use it. So it's a very generalized tool. Like first of all, restaking is absolutely inevitable. Like unless the Ethereum protocol is changed, I don't even know how you could change it to disable restaking. Because you could literally do it at the hardware level. Like I don't restaking is something that just is like the next logical step after proof of stake. So it was obvious that it was going to go in this direction. So it is an inevitability, and the question is it how is it used? I think everything I've seen, I think the EigenLayer team is very much aligned with Ethereum. They're being very careful again, I don't really know the details of it, but we talked to lots of folks on the team. It seems like they're being very careful about which AVSs they're selecting. They're being very careful about, well, in some ways trying to stay neutral and like onboarding and whitelisting AVSs. So I think they have the right concerns in mind. Now, because restaking is such a direct next step after proof of stake, there's going to be others that probably are less careful. And it really just becomes a community effort. So there are tons of risks, tons and tons of risks. I'll say this: there are a lot of very, very real, but at this point hypothetical risks because there is no restaking. Nothing actually exists, and like EigenDA or EigenLayer has no slashing conditions right now. So it's just like, sure, everybody restake everything on EigenDA. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, obviously they're gonna add slashing conditions, but so it's all very hypothetical at this point. There are actually very real like centralization risks in Ethereum that are like right in your face, like much like, a truck kind of barreling at you. And everyone's like, this restaking thing, oh man, this is going to be a problem. Like, dude, have you seen Lido? Like, it's like a 3x levered coin with no on-chain redemption mechanism. Like, it could lead to a complete, yeah.
That was my follow-up question. So 25% of Ethereum supply is staked, and 2%, around 32% is staked through Lido.
75% of all on-chain.
Absolutely.
So it's a big number.
The first question is, do you think with restaking this will get better in the sense that Lido will lose some of its market share?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I'll do another small thing. So stablecoins are another big centralization risk. I mean, you have USDT has a virtual monopoly. USDC is obviously big as well. Like, imagine if one of them decides to fork for whatever reason. There's a dispute, there's a fork, and one of them chooses one, the other chooses another. Like, those are non-hypothetical, very like real risks. Okay, I think the liquid staking space is going to get super fragmented, which is really good because it will hurt Lido dominance. The reason I think it'll get fragmented is because in vanilla staking, let's say, the first gen staking protocols, from the user perspective, we can talk about the technical merits of like Lido, Rocket Pool, Stakewise, whatever. We can talk about those, but like from the user perspective, all the tokens are in like most of the DeFi protocols. All of them are on exchanges. They all pay the same yield, roughly 3.5%. As a user, like maybe you're philosophically aligned to another, it doesn't really matter. It's the same product for you. And so then, of course, people just choose the biggest one because there's this sort of false perception of safety because it's the biggest. And so you do have this winner take all effect running. In the world where restaking is the primary source of yield, which I think is a world we're getting to, because between dank sharding, all these data availability layers popping up, rollups, transactions moving to rollups, like staking yield is going to come way down. Staking yield is probably going to be less than 1% in a year or two, because you're going to have like 80% of ETH staked, and it's just it's going to be the yields are going to be low. So in a world where staking yield is low, primary source of yields is restaking, and you see this the situation where there's 1,000 different AVSs or more that are providing restaking services through EigenLayer or otherwise. There's now 1,000 factorial ways of repackaging those. So you can now have super niche-y, weird, bespoke liquid staking tokens that that plug into those. You can have large protocols that offer multiple products. So I think the space is just going to get super fragmented. I don't know exactly what Lido's plans are in this category. It wouldn't be surprising if they enter the space at some point, but like there's just going to be much more differentiation. You're still probably going to have like a top 4 or 5 players. Hopefully we're one of those. But you're going to have a long tail of probably hundreds. I mean, we're already seeing some of them, probably literally 100 at this point, popping up. I mean, most of those won't survive, but like there will be real ones that actually do survive over time.
So right now, actually, if you go on categories by TVL on DeFi Lemma, you can see that liquid staking is the first one by a large margin now, 34 billion, and restaking is actually around 2 billion now. So you're predicting that 1% yield on
liquid restaking? Is it actually at 2 billion?
So liquid restaking right now.
You might be looking at restaking. Restaking is just
oh yeah, Yeah, restaking is 2
Liquid
billion and liquid
restaking is
restaking
like,
is 1.5.
wow, I
I
didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah, it is, yes.
Well,
And
okay, it's a little bit fake. That's kind of a bullshit metric. But anyway, that's a pedantic point.
when are you predicting that restaking LRTs will overtake LSTs in TVL?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say sometime in 2025. Um, yeah, I don't think I think it'd be hard for it to happen in 2024. Like there would have to be like a real like waterfall. Something bad would have to happen to Lido. Like Lido would need to get experience a liquidity crunch and the sort of deleverage basically. That would lead to a huge replatforming onto others, which could very well happen. But that's I wouldn't say that's a high probability event. So I think 2025 is likely. Maybe I'm going to say towards the end of 2025. That's my prediction.
We've seen actually Stader, which has which are the guys who launched Kelp. There is also
Yep.
Swell, I think, which was into LSTs now entering into LRTs. And considering the capital that Lido has, it's not really out of question that they also enter the field, given that
Yeah,
there is this
for sure.
opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that could be a very quick way for it to get. If Lido launches an EigenLayer competitor or decides to build like a version, like I don't know how they would do it. It would be tricky. If it decides to build a version that's on top of Lido, that is, the Lido supported LRT, that could be different.
Let's talk about AVSs. There are already around 10 or 12 AVSs launched, actually listed on EigenLayer. There is EigenDA, there is Espresso, Ethos, Hyperlane, Omni, etc. As a protocol, so first, if I understand correctly, EigenLayer has to whitelist these, so it's on them, and then LRT protocols choose which one of these they want to work with. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes,
What
it's a three-sided marketplace, like I guess almost four-sided in the sense if EigenLayer is part of the deal.
And which ones, if it's public information, which ones are the ones that you guys are working with? Which AVSs?
Well, none of them are live, so we can't work with any of them. But we're talking to all of them, and we're talking to our node operators, both solo stakers and professional operators. Honestly, nobody's ready for anything. Everybody is like kind of trying to figure out how this is all going to work. The node operators are sort of like, yeah, we'll see when this thing goes. And so nobody's like doing a ton. So we're trying to push our node operators to say, hey, you need to get on EigenLayer because otherwise we're going to take away all your ETH. Like we need you ready to run these AVSs. So we're trying to like connect AVSs to node operators, make sure people are good to go. And then on the AVS side, like I don't even know who's on testnet. A handful of them are on testnet. I think Lagrange is on testnet. That's cool. And I think Ethos is also, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously EigenDA. So, like all of the ones on there seem pretty solid. Like I don't see us. Obviously, it depends on like the audits and like risk analysis and all that. But like all the ones on the list so far are pretty solid, and I think we'd be happy to to support them.
Do you plan to have governance in EtherFi to choose actually these AVSs through your community, or how do you plan to do that?
Eventually, yes. Yeah, eventually, yes. In the short term, I just don't see how that's practical. The risk profile of these AVSs needs to start getting more standardized. What I mean by that is the slashing rules probably need to go into like buckets. And my hope is that AVSs, there's SDKs now or stacks that are starting to get built. There's a company called Authentic that's pretty cool, that's building basically a stack to make it easier for you to build an AVS. And so my hope is that people implement, let's say them or other solutions where there's now like templates for slashing rules. Like you can have an AVS that has no slashing. Like I'll give you an example. We're actually working on an AVS that we're pretty excited about. It's called DAP Bridge. We haven't launched it yet, but that AVS will not have slashing. It doesn't need to have slashing. It's sort of just a consensus based thing. So that's like effectively the lowest risk you can take. There's no slashing. Just you're just getting additional revenue from compute. You're essentially just selling compute. On the other side of it, you have something that might have extreme one shot, all your ETH is gone kind of slashing, and then you can have something in between or a combination thereof, where it's more like Ethereum, like missing attestations, where it's like a slow bleed over time. So these rules have to get bucketed. Someone, maybe that'll be us, maybe it'll be Gauntlet, maybe it'll be others, like needs to define like these risk characterizations, and then there needs to be developed a very complex model that incorporates like correlation between AVSs. So if two AVSs are very correlated and could slash at the same time, you don't want to stack them on top of each other. In other words, you don't want the same ETH serving them. And risk profile. And so it's almost like a three-dimensional matrix kind of with a bunch of parameter sets and a very complicated risk model that protocols like us will implement and use. None of that exists right now. All of this is made up and theoretical. So initially it will be a decision, like an explicit deep dive into the specific AVS and an explicit decision to say, yeah, okay, we're comfortable doing this. We'll add this percent of our ETH. Like that's how I think it's going to work for the next like year, probably. So eventually, yes, there will be programmatic governance based on all these like parameterizations. That's like so far away, I can't even see it. Like I don't even know. I have no idea how you go from here to there.
So you've worked for a fund, and I guess as I see it, it's actually kind of building a portfolio, right, of which AVSs, because they each have different profiles, and so you might want.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so there's a very large, I think maybe the largest corporate bond manager called PIMCO. If anyone in finance knows PIMCO. So yeah, that's what they do. You've got a bunch of like finance nerds sitting there doing a deep dive on every company, figuring out what their debt, their risk, and they have some risk model they plug it into, and they say, okay, here's a portfolio with this risk profile and this yield, and then they package it up and sell it. So I think that's basically what LRTs are going to have to do, and you're going to have multiple products, because one product probably won't serve. For sure, it won't serve everyone. It's not going to be one size fits all. So we're probably going to take like a tranched approach, where you have one or a handful of bundles and tranches, like senior, junior tranches that users can select. Now that would take time, because obviously each tranche, each product splits up your liquidity. So you need to be careful with that. But eventually there will be enough liquidity in the space that's fine.
So Ethos is a project that wants to bring Ethereum security to Cosmos through restaking.
Yeah, I just spoke to them. They're great.
What is? Do you see that this as an upcoming trend where restaking could be used not only for Ethereum community and L2s, but also on other alt L1s?
It's so hard. I mean, I think so. It seems very plausible and like a good idea, right? The question is, do they need that forever, or do they need that just to bootstrap their network? And either one is fine, but like that's a question. Like, does it last forever, or is it just like you bootstrap it and then you sort of switch? The other question is like, is that the best application, or will there be others that dominate? I don't think anybody's in a position to make predictions. At a high level, that seems like a great idea. Sounds awesome. Obviously we're happy to support them. So yeah, hopefully that is in fact part of the future.
So let's talk about EtherFi's success. There are a bunch of protocols who almost all launched pretty at the same time, but your TVL is like we said, more than 1 billion in just a few days or weeks. How do you explain? And you are not the only one doing native restaking. As you said, there is Renzo and others coming.
There's a couple others.
How do you explain the success you've had so far?
Well, we were first. I think that it's amazing. It's only a few months, right? Like we were only first by a few months, but it's such a crazy, fast moving space that even just that is like confers a huge advantage. I think that's, I mean, one part of it is we were first. Two is that I think our product is just really solid. Like it's just super clean. It's I won't even talk about this as a comparison to others, but I'll tell you what our users like about us. It's really simple. It's low gas. You can deposit. It's super cheap. Some other protocols, it's like 5 times more gas than depositing into EtherFi. We have redemptions enabled. Believe it or not, it's only us and Lido, as far as I'm aware, that have redemptions enabled. So it's honestly kind of crazy that people are like, yeah, I'm just going to put $100 million into a one-way contract, like, because there's, a few $1,000,000 of on-chain liquidity that I can hopefully swap out of. But anyway, so we're one of the few ones that have on-chain redemption. So I think users feel safe about that. And then I think we did a really good job getting integrations. Like we got plugged into a ton of DeFi protocols very quickly. Pendle has been wildly successful, and we were first on there. We just launched on Morpho, which I really, that's a huge protocol that I think will be great. Silo as well, another lending protocol. We're obviously working on, getting on Aave. So yeah, we've just been super effective at plugging into DeFi, and I think our brand is good. I think justifiably, like we've been very, very focused on staying aligned with Ethereum. So everything from our Operation Solo Staker, trying to get lots of solo stakers spun up and on board. Yeah, we just made an announcement that we're going to give 1% of our tokens to Protocol Guild. We have an advisory board that has a bunch of very strongly Ethereum aligned people on it. Those are some of the things that I think we've done right, and we'll continue to do that. We're going to continue to focus on creating value for our users.
That's a lot of things, and it's showing actually its effects. People are trusting EtherFi, and it's great to see. Also mentioning that probably one of the differentiator is that non-custodial aspect, right? Which not all the...
Yeah, that's right. That's actually a very good point. I didn't talk about that enough. This is... I don't know how to say this exactly. Right now, there's a major challenge with Ethereum staking that a lot of, I guess actually all other protocols except EtherFi are subject to. Specifically, that challenge is that when you put ETH into a protocol, again, every protocol other than EtherFi, the node operator is the only one that holds the validator key. That sounds like, okay, why does that matter? Well, it matters because the only way you can get your ETH back is if someone generates an exit transaction using the validator key. There is no other way to get your ETH back. You have to exit the validator for the ETH to come back. And so if the node operator is the only one that holds that key, you've basically given up control of your ETH. Like you can't, there's no way for you to force them to give you your ETH back. There's ways to sort of mitigate that are okay, I would say, like pre-signed exit messages. So Lido, I think, forces everybody to do pre-signed exit messages. But like there's risks associated with that. That's problematic. EtherFi stakers that serve as bondholders hold the validator key. And in the case of solo stakers, they split that key up into shards and give pieces of it to different operators, and our intention is to scale that part of it substantially. So what that means is if like the protocol needs liquidity, if the protocol says we need 1,000 ETH has just been requested, we need to exit a bunch of validators, there's a smart contract based incentive mechanism to require the bondholders to exit the validator, because if they don't, they get slashed. So there's a slashing mechanism in place for forcing exits. It's basically like a hacky kind of version of EIP 7002, which is execution layer based exits. And that is, I would say, a very strong guarantee that you will always be able to get your ETH back. Like, depending on obviously withdrawal queues, The timing might be different, but you will always be able to get it back at some point. So we're the only ones that have this. We designed it because I mentioned our fund that we're running. I wasn't comfortable deploying capital. I wasn't comfortable deploying my money into something where I wasn't sure I could get it back. And so we designed this for ourselves. Like, I wanted this feature. So I think it's important. It's a protocol designed with the staker in mind, let's say, rather than like with the node operator in mind.
Great. So in April, you will have your TGE. You've decided to go with the route of first providing points, rewards, miles, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them, and then actually release your
Yeah.
token. Some other competitors or LRT players like Restake Finance or Vector Reserve, they have already launched their
Yeah.
token. What do you
Yeah.
think? What are the considerations here to launch a token or wait a bit and then launch it later? And what will be the utility of this token other than just airdropping and giving the rewards?
Yeah, there's only so much I can say about this because some of it we haven't officially announced yet. I don't want to criticize others. I think we feel that it's a better choice to have an actual product that people are using, that's generating revenue. That's like, okay, there's something here before launching a token. It's almost it feels weird to do that backwards. There's a lot of weird incentives that arise when you're just that was the whole ICO boom, right? Everybody launched 1 million tokens. All of them were scams because like, once you launch a token and you get millions of dollars, you're like, why do I need to do anything else? I already got the money, right? Like, it's so I just think that's the logical thing to do. The whole points thing is it's like jump the shark. So that's when we started doing points, it was in like February of 2023. We literally did it the same time as Blur, which was, I think they were the first ones, and they inspired others. So we're partially to blame for this crazy thing. So at the time, like, nobody was doing points. We were like, oh, what a smart idea we had. And now it's like everyone's doing these freaking point systems. It's like it's
And it
gone
becomes a
insane.
competition, right? Who's providing the most number of points? Everybody's farming airdrops with EigenLayer. It's a big speculation there.
Well, and you can't say the points have nothing to do with an airdrop. I don't know what you're talking about. The points are points. Don't attach them to the token. So anyway, it is kind of insane. We are going to be doing a token launch. We've said in April. There will be utility. I can say there will be value accrual to the token. It's not going to be a meme coin with the name of the protocol. It's actually going to have value associated with the protocol. I don't want to talk specifically about what the value accrual is, because we haven't finalized it, and I don't think we can talk about that yet. But it will be a much more logic. Like, my previous company, Topa, was like a SaaS. It got up to like a 500-person company. Like, it was a SaaS business. Like, it made sense. It made money. There were customers. Like, it was very logical. And so I bring a lot of that bias, I guess, into crypto, where I like things to make sense. I like there to be cash flows.
It's true that if you look at most DeFi protocols or even blockchains, they are not net profitable if you consider the inflation and the revenue that they have.
It's so much worse. You have teams that are financially illiterate. Like, there are teams that think that token emissions are revenue. Like, it's just complete bonkers how much money is in this space for and how dumb.
And we've seen some of it with FTX blowing up, and we saw that they don't have an accountant for a company that has billions. So that was a good example of a good illustration of the space somehow. So tell us about the roadmap for the next quarters and 25. What you have in mind?
Yeah, so we have a lot of stuff in mind. The things that I can talk about. I think the days of thin protocols, which just do one very narrow thing, are not going to last. I think you are going to. It's like a bank that just provides a checking account. Like, maybe that can make sense, but like it's not good for the customer. Like, the customer wants more services than that. So users having to navigate like 1,000 hyper-specific protocols and like trying to maneuver around that's not how crypto scales to a billion users. So our goal is to provide like a layer, a suite of products over time that create a really easy experience for users to stake their ETH, to deploy their capital, to then eventually use it out in the real world. That's broadly the roadmap that we're following. And then in parallel to that, on the back end, we hope to participate in the restaking ecosystem by actually building restaking services. I mean, that's a very broad scope, and it'll take years to fully develop. But that's how I see us building an enduring, profitable, cash flow generating business over a long period of time.
Amazing. Thanks, Mike, for your insights. That was really insightful. People, I will share your, information about your protocol EtherFi on the links. Check out the links. Thanks again for your time. People, check out EtherFi, and talk to you again soon.
Great. Thank you.